speak, and I'll hand you over to him.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the invitation. Can I ask how many of you are not regular Astronomy Club members who are casual audience with a slight interest?
Yeah.
Good, because I have to confess I'm a geologist, but I know nothing really about astronomy. I feel like a little nervous about this because I'm sure many of you, most of you know more than I do. And I think this was maybe some blurb I gave you for advertising this, but I have the advantage being the curator of geology in the Natural History Museum in Dublin. I actually have things, real things to look after, and it's those that I brought with me as a chance to show you. So you get a chance to handle some real things, probably hold the oldest things that you will be able to touch. I am aiming this at a broad audience, so anybody who's an astronomer, please bear with me and take it in that context, because I have a very simplistic view of some of these things. Because my interest started about 10 years ago when I decided to do an exhibition of, we called it Outplace in Space, and this was for the National Museum place in Castlebar, the Folklore Museum. So it's partly about bringing something new to them for the local audience, and it was partly about a chance to bring out some of our collections, because the Dead Zoo, as a lot of people call it in Dublin, is a zoological museum. The geological collections have all largely been in storage since 1962, when the building was demolished to make room for the Doyle Bar and Restaurant. So you get a quick idea where national priorities lie. So collections have been in storage, people don't know they exist. It was an opportunity to bring them out. So that's where my interest arose, and I got rather keen on the meteorites. So this is very briefly the structure of the talk. Just talk a little bit about what meteorites are and what they tell us and how we classify them. Then the main thrust of what I want to talk about is the Irish meteorite falls, and depending on time, a little bit again about the impacts of meteorites, and we'll see when we get there. And I have meteorites here which I want to hand around. I want to get them all back, obviously. So if I can start on one side and they pass back and come back round, that would be excellent. Hopefully there's enough reach there to do that. What are they? Meteorites are any bit of space rock that actually lives through to the Earth. Meteoroids are that space rock that's out in space. So any bit of debris in space is a meteoroid, but when it hits the Earth, it may create a shooting star, and often that's something small, the size of a grain of sand or a small pebble, and it's melting as it burns up friction with the Earth's atmosphere. If it's big enough, it may create a fireball, like this one, and it may make it to the surface. And in my mind, I'm seeing something this big starting off, coming in from space, being a fireball, and maybe ending up with something this big. No real rational basis for that, but obviously, if you're melting away a lot of that rock, things are going to get smaller. So they have to be a certain size before they'll land as meteorites. And one of the biggest known was the Sikota Limb in 1947 in Siberia. There was an artist, Medvedev, who was out, just happened to be painting his village when this happened, so he naturally painted it with the fireball, and that's a sort of an iconic image. And it's been on Russian stamps and things. The The total mass of this meteorite was estimated at something like 23 tons, and the main mass exploded kind of before it hit the ground. And so, although you do get large pieces, this is a 60 kilogram, quite a whopping piece. Most of this meteorite occurs as small fragmentary bits of like shrapnel, basically. So there's two of those there to pass around.
Two?
Two pieces, yeah. I know exactly what they feel like. One's sharp. I have fingers on them actually, because one of them is quite sharp and pointy. They vary depending on the breakup, but that's the typical sort of stuff that you can buy at trade shows and meteorite fairs and online and so on, if you want to get hold of some. So where do we find meteorites? One of the best places is actually in deserts. A lot of the meteorites that are found are coming out of Africa and the Middle East, because they are generally quite dark coloured with black outer surface like these. So they stand out against the lighter sand or paler rock. And the darkness is because they have a fusion crust. As they melt coming in as a fireball, the outside gets blackened, and so the interior of those meteorites is often a much lighter pale coloured rock, but the outside has this black fusion crust, and that's one of the characteristic things to look for if you're trying to identify them. So these are in desert kind of environments, but strangely Antarctica is another really good place to find meteorites, because they're black against the white of the snow. And you have up here a strewn field of a meteorite fall. You'll never be able to buy or acquire an Antarctic meteorite because they are protected by the Antarctic Treaty, and they all go into research institutes in America or other countries. So if you ever see one for sale, it's either fraud or dubious, should we say. So what do they look like? There's three main types. There's stony meteorites, iron meteorites, and stony iron meteorites. And the stony ones are the standard type, and this is a stony meteorite from Mali. I'm going to pass it around. You'll be able to see it's got the black fusion crust, but there's a bit where it's broken and chipped, and you can see inside it's a much lighter colour, and that's feel the weight of that as well. It's to a lot of people it just looks like a neon rock, but they are distinguished by having chondrules, which you can't see very well, but little tiny spherical blobs called chondrules, and I'll talk about those a bit more in a minute. The iron meteorites, this is a slice that you can see here, and you'll see better in a minute. The iron meteorites are I'll come back to that. Just feel the weight when you get this. And then the stony iron meteorites are, and we'll explain a bit more about these in a minute, but I'll pass this one around. I only bought this one just in Munich in the trade show in October for this handling collection. It's called a palisite. These type on the left, the stony irons are called palisites. This one is from Kenya, and it's called Serico, and it fell, I think, only in 2017. So you're looking at a slice of a whole meteorite that's been polished there. 130 or something. I can't remember exactly, so 5 in 200. No, I think that's 130, and I bought another one, which is 200 for the whole piece.
Looks like amber, no?
It does look like amber, yes, that is a good analogy. It's actually a mineral called olivine in general, or it may be pyroxene, and it's been cut as a thin slice here so that you can see the light shining through the silicate crystals. So that's what they look like. And occasionally, if you look at the top left one, occasionally they come in and they kind of maintain their orientation, so they melt away and you end up with a nose cone effect. That one is a famous Middlesbrough meteorite. It's just a plaster cast replica that we have, but it's a famous one. It's, if you were looking at it from the side, it's like a volcano shape. But the iron meteorites, you see in this picture, you see it's a very kind of difficult surface, and you'll see the one that's going around is a bit like that. These are called regoliths, or sometimes thumbprints. It's almost like somebody kind of went along and pushed their thumb into it. And that's a very distinctive characteristic of meteorites. If you see those, particularly the iron meteorites, but also on the other ones, that's a characteristic thing to look for. On the right here, you see what's called Widmanstatten patterns, and if I cut the one that's being passed around, it would look, and polished it and etched it with acid, it would look like that. And I've a couple here, actually, these are all the same. They're from a Swedish meteorite called Muonionaluster that is found in quite big masses and quite a few tons of it. The thing about those patterns, you only find those in meteorites. You won't be able to replicate those on Earth if you are working with iron, because they are representing the very dense crystal structure of the iron, and it's nickel and iron in fact. And you need the gravity of a small planetary body or a large asteroid to get that kind of structure. So early in the solar system, a lot of the small bodies were accreting and melting because of the radiogenic heat in there. And what happens is you get a differentiated body. So you have a core, and this is like the Earth, where we have a core of solid iron and nickel, and you have an outer crust of mostly silicate minerals. And then you have the mantle in between. And so some of these asteroids and small planetary bodies differentiated like this. And so these meteorites kind of are equivalents of the core is the iron meteorites, the stony meteorites are the outer parts, and then these rare stony iron ones are kind of from the mantle or from the core mantle zone. So I hope that makes sense in a simplistic kind of way. I'm going to go quickly through classification. I'm not going to spend long on this because it's not the core of the talk, but we can classify them in various ways, and this shows these chondrules magnified. You can see these spherical blobs. They're a mix of iron and silica together, and you don't get those in any earth rocks. So if you slice a rock and you find those, then you have a meteorite. No problem. I see. So, oops, I missed one. Start with the rarer achondrites, which are the ones that don't have chondrules. Ironically, of course, there's always an exception to the rule. And some of these may be from the Moon and Mars, some of them are from specific asteroids. There's less than 8% of known meteorites are achondrites, and some of them are even thought to have come from Mercury. But the vast majority, something like 82% of all known meteorites, are chondrites, containing these chondrules, and they're the basic bog standard type, like the Marley one that I passed around there first. There's an unusual type called Carbonaceouschondrites, and these have had amino acids identified in them and have been discussed as possibly seeding life on Earth, because these amino acids are found in living things on Earth today. But these are quite a rare type. The parasites, as I've handed one round, this is, should we say, an exceptional piece. If you were to try and buy a piece like that for an exhibition, you might be looking at €50 or dollars or whatever, because they are quite rare. They're only about 1% of all known meteorite falls. But things of great beauty when you see them cut into slices like that and backlit. Mesosidereites. These are a rare type of stony iron meteorites, which may have been where you had two already differentiated bodies smacking into each other and then coalescing, if you like. So you get a kind of a different pattern of the iron and silicate mix, but they're quite rare as well. So the iron meteorites, which are the ones that a lot of people have, and you know, if you have a single image of a meteorite, it generally tends to be these iron ones with this characteristic sort of pyramid or dimple kind of surface, and the weakness happens again. They are mostly made up of nickel and iron, but there are other elements in things like niobium and iridium, and things like iridium have been indicated in the potential impact that potentially killed dinosaurs off. You find a layer that's rich in iridium from an impact. So where they come from, you've got the 4 rocky planets and 4 gassy planets, and somewhere in between is the asteroid belt, and most of the meteorites are from there. Obviously not all to scale in these illustrations. And these asteroids, obviously they are, some of them big, kilometres, tens of kilometres, and you can see from these images they're full of impact craters. So a big impact of one against another can set parts of those asteroids off into an orbit that then intersects with the Earth's orbit and hence lands with us as a meteorite. I seem to be trigger happy here, sorry. So I've covered that first part briefly, and now I want to cover the Irish Meteorite falls, and if I keep them over there, frankly.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just say getting up and down. You'll see there, these are the known witnessed meteorite falls in Ireland, and you can see there's a fair spread in geography and a fair spread in time. There's no pattern to them, and obviously this isn't all of the meteorites that have ever fallen. There's I'm not sure exact figures, but I've read of estimates of 20,000 meteorites a year falling on Earth. Obviously most of them going into sea or into deserts or remote areas, jungles. They might be falling at night and not get seen. They might be falling in the field next to you or in your garden, but buried in soil, vegetation, and not ground. So, witnessed falls where people have seen the fireball or experienced the fall and seen it and then collected it are quite rare. There's another one after it isn't on this map, but I'm going to start with the oldest and just work through them. Pettis Wood in 1779. This is here in Mullingar. Although it fell in 1779, this right up, as you see, it wasn't till 1796. So how much the story has kind of evolved in that time is up for conjecture. But there were pieces found and collected. This guy at the time thought that they were bits of the Earth that had been sucked up by some atmospheric thing and then re-falling. And obviously things have come on a bit in how we think meteorites form. But and it's described as the size of a twopenny heart cake. Obviously that meant something at that time. I have no idea what a twopenny heart, but I picture something relatively small for that. But unfortunately we don't have any stones definitely in collections that come from this witness fall. But it seems from what we can read there that there were enough witnesses that it wasn't just a made-up story. Two very frightened boys driving a cart, obviously, but to its descent, 5 witnesses are now living, 3 of whom reside in London. But it's either a big conspiracy or a reasonable witness statement. But there's some recurring themes in these witness statements about meteorite falls. He says here it's warm as milk just from the cow, and that warmth thing comes out in a few of them. The noises that were heard is a very interesting thing which we'll come to with each of them. But this one, the strange thing about this description is he's talking about it being tinged to a whitish brown, whereas internally it's silver white. That doesn't match too well with the notion of the black fusion crust that you get on many meteorites, but it's not a definite no-no, if you see what I mean. They do vary in colour. So that's Pettis Wood. In 1810, in Mooresfoot in Tipperary, there was another fall, and this one you start getting into the description of the noises. So you've got noise like a chimney on fire, swarm of bees, but they saw it fall and it was immediately dug up. And sorry, this is and that is this one. Now, I have to swear you all to secrecy because, or conspiracy here, because I've completely gone against all sorts of museum regulations bringing things here, but I didn't really feel it was fair to you to give this talk without actually a chance to see some of these genuine Irish meteorites. So this one I'm going to pass around now is the Mooresfoot meteorite that we have. Those photographs are this piece, so you'll get to see again the fusion crust, the grey sort of interior, that you can see here. But this one was originally much bigger. What you're seeing is only a part of the whole stone. That's a plaster cast of it that is actually that one. So there's, and please don't drop these, because they're not modern, they're historical pieces in their own right.
Is this just a plaster cast?
A plaster cast of the Norsefoot meteorite taken shortly after it was found and documented. And it weighed 7.7 pounds, which to younger people in the audience is about, what is it, about
3 bags.
about 3 kilos, yeah. And that was written up pretty much after it was found. Move on to Kileta in 1844. This is in Tyrone, and it was about as long as the joint of the little finger, so this is only a very small stone. But there were accounts of it, and going back to the topic of the noises that people heard associated with this one, I really wonder what strolling German bands sounded like. It was probably pretty awful. So you have these, everyone seems to have these accounts of the different kind of noises that they heard, and I personally don't know what to make of them and the veracity of them, but it's certainly interesting. This one, there is, he says he received the fragments of these stones from Reverend Dr. McIver, ex-fellow of Trinity College, Rector of Irish, and we think that there's a stone in Trinity College's Geology Museum that is one of these Kileta stones, but it's very hard to be certain with the remove of time and absolute lack of clarity on labels and things. So, but again, he adds that the people of the locality are very uncurious, and if there were a veritable burning bush thereabouts, you would turn aside to see. It's quite damning indictment of the people. I find it hard to believe that they didn't take some more interest in it, but so that was Kileta.
Maybe the year, maybe they were here already.
Sorry?
The year 40s?
Yes, that's true, yeah. You can't eat stones, yeah. That's a very good point. So, jumping on now to Dundrum in 1865. And again, we're talking noises shot out of a cannon, not like thunder, buzzing noise for a quarter of an hour. But they saw it fall and dug it up from the top of a potato drill. And this is an illustration from the time. This is a contemporary plaster cast of that stone as well. So again, please handle with the greatest care. And it has this sort of pyramidal form. It's got the smooth fusion crust on the outside again. This was nearly 15 pounds weight, which I think is about 6 kilos. And this is in the Geology Museum in Trinity College. I thought I bought a bit of that one, but maybe not just the stone, just the replica. Yeah. Sorry, we do have a small size of that. Cromlin in 1902, and I do have a small piece of this, which September the 13th. Crumlin is in County Antrim. And you can see, this is a photograph of the piece we have of them passing around. It's another bog standard chondrite. All the Irish ones are all bog standard chondrites. Sadly, we've got nothing exceptionally unusual in terms of the type classification. So they're all quite similar in appearance. But this one, you won't be able to read this. This is from the Irish Weekly Independence and Nation paper, November the 15th. Because at the time this fell, the British Association for the Advancement of Science were having a big meeting in Belfast, and they all it happened while they were there, and they got very excited and went out. But this guy, who was the director of the British Museum in London, zoomed out and basically took the meteorite from under everybody's noses and took it back to London. And you won't be able to. The British Museum has collared another Irish treasure, a remarkable meteorite which fell near Belfast during the period of the British Association's visit to that city last September. And there's a verse underneath which you can read for yourself. It's got a nice lilt to it. So definitely generated some feelings about that.
Are they giving it back?
They still have it.
They don't give back.
They don't give. Well, they very occasionally do, but they're not going to give back into meteorites. It was all part of the British Empire at the time, so anyway, that was Crumlin. The next one is also in Northern Ireland, Bovidi. This one, in 1969, we're getting into the modern realm where not only the things witnessed, but there are photographs and so forth. So you see here the field where the Bovidi meteorite was dug up in Northern Ireland, and here there's a picture of a fireball that was taken in North Wales, and there's a lot of sightings of this fireball, and so there's good data that it was travelling at about 35,000 miles an hour, and temperature-wise about 4,000 degrees C. And it went across southern Britain, across Wales, across the Irish Sea, and across Northern Ireland. That photograph of the fireball was taken in North Wales. Took less than a minute to cross the UK, and about 15 seconds to cross Northern Ireland. And it actually fell as two stones, one at Bovidi here and one at Sprucefield here. And Sprucefield, if you've ever driven up the motorway from Dublin to Belfast, it's the place where the A1 meets the M1 and the big Sainsbury's superstore and all that kind of thing. But in 1969, there was a local landmark was the RUC station, and this stone actually fell through the roof. You can see the hole I've made here, and there it is sitting on the table. This is a cut section of it, I have a piece here. This is actually not the Sprucefield stone. This is from the Bovidi stone, and it's cut and polished, sliced, which you can have a look at. And again, it's the same box standard chondrite. But in 1969, RUC station, you might think there was a bit of trouble. But actually it fell in the middle of the night, so they just found it in the morning. And it wasn't.
Just sitting on the table.
Just sitting on the table. So,
Could I just say, I paid €125 for this piece of Morse fort,
oh, did you?
so I reckon this is equivalent value. This is €80,000. Seriously.
I know exactly how many I've got.
Take away.
Yeah, I mean, monetary values are problematic for me as a curator.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a private collector, and it's not a case of how much I'm willing
It's
to
the
pay.
rarity value, isn't it? I mean,
It's a heritage
Yeah.
value. But at the same time, I have been buying any Irish meteorites I could find for the collections, and it's like some of these things I've bought in recent terms.
you have a bit more influence than the rest of those as the curator.
And
Need a bit more pull.
and a small budget
Wow,
from the
yeah.
museum to be able to buy stuff like that. You know, there's a very good argument for us acquiring pieces when they're available. So, sorry. I've never looked on there. The Bovidi stone itself, this is it. We don't have any except that piece that I bought from another small ship. But it was size of a flat football field. Actually, the Ulster Museum has this, and I did borrow a cast for the exhibition. Please get a cast made for us. But that's it anyway. And have you ever had a talk from Professor Ian Sanders from Trinity College? No, I think so. If you can get him, recommend it. Or if you can go to a meeting where he's talking about his research. He's a real meteorite expert, and I've heard him talk on this topic a couple of times. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but basically he's using the Bovidi meteorite and the chondrules to argue a different idea to the conventional wisdom that these chondrules were formed by some sort of flash melting of dust in the early solar system. He's arguing that they came a bit later than the calcium aluminium inclusions that are in some of the meteorites that would have released radioactive energy for an initial period, enough to melt these planetismals at the early stages of the solar system. And his idea is that those planetismals melted first, I think we're talking about the first 2 million years or so, but that then some of them would have collided into each other, and that the chondrules are kind of splatter of droplets from those collisions. That's the kind of argument that he's making, rather than being a melting of dust. And you get different types of chondrites, and so different parent bodies colliding with each other could explain that. So certainly recommend listening to him on the topic if you get the opportunity. The last known meteorite fall with a stone was at Lochlin Bridge near Carlow in 1999, just before the end of the century. And again, you can see standard chondrite, fusion crust, paler interior. A couple of golf ball-sized pieces were found. And there's an interesting story here as well, in that the fireball was seen by lots of people, and lots of sightings meant that Astronomy Island were able to triangulate where they thought it landed, when they thought it landed somewhere near Carlow. But at the same time, a mineral dealer in Scotland was advertising and possibly offering a reward. I can't quite remember details of that now, but apparently he received a parcel from an anonymous grandma who found it on the road and outside of the house. So he had these meteorites, and my boss in the museum tried to get one at the time, but the guy was just asking too much money, so we didn't acquire any of the Lachlan Bridge meteorite at the time. I have since bought a piece which
Is he gone?
he's kind of retiring or retired. And I have talked to him and tried to get any remaining bits, and I think this was one of the remaining bits that I got. 15 grams.
It's always left to anonymously, like they didn't bother saying whatever reward you put up.
Well, they may have got a reward.
Yeah,
I'm not going to comment actually. Best I don't, because I might say something that I don't mean to say.
I got my piece of Limerick from him, so I hope he's genuine. Elliot.
Oh, right, you've got some Limerick?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Right.
I don't find it in
I'm implying something that I don't have any justification.
It's a dodgy story, I think.
Where was I? Sorry, I lost track. Anyway, yeah. Oh, so the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that there was a Limerick meteorite on the map, and I took it out of order. So I thought I might as well save the best till last. So this fell in 1813, and the first bits that fell landed in Adair, and they were sometimes called the Adair aerolites, and I have them, some of them here in a bag, and they've fallen out of a little pot. To all intents and purposes, they look like road chickens. But they were the first bits that the Limerick meteorite to fall. That's those around, but don't open the bag, but please just keep them in because they're very small. There were other masses that fell, and then the biggest mass fell in Patrick's Well, and that was the Brassy Mess, which you can see in the picture. And here's the big reveal. This is my favourite thing in the whole museum.
It's not a plastic acid.
It's not a plastic acid, it's the real thing. It's 65 pounds weight, 25 kilos. So I would ask that when you come and have a look at it, no trying to pick it up, because I have it perched that way for best effect, but it's not.
Can you be photographed with it?
Sorry?
Can you be photographed with it?
You can, yeah. It's okay. I'm not. You can talk about it. I'm not. But just not to museum management or anything. No, don't put it on Facebook. But for your own private consumption, yeah. I'll just get flies to cast this. This is a description of it, and again you've got the reports about the sound. You've got this somewhat resembling the discharge of heavy artillery, and then a noise not unlike the beating of a large drum, followed by continued discharge of musketry in line. Musketry being, musket guns. All of these reports are interesting. I need to keep moving because I'm taking up more time than I should here. Descriptions of the noise and the whole sort of thing that was observed great violence. But there was, in the published paper about this meteorite afterwards in the Proceedings of the Royal Dublin Society, there was a fall in Scar townland, and there was a fall in the Fatna townland, and then the Brassy one. What's interesting and difficult to work out, and people have kind of keep asking questions, and I'm not sure of the answers. We have the Brassy Mess. The museum acquired it from a landowner in 1946. The Oxford University Museum of Natural History has the Fatna mass, which was the 17-pound mass, but the Scar mass, 24-pound one, nobody knows where it is. It may be that it was broken up, and maybe the bit you've got there is a small bit of that. But equally, it could be sitting propping up a door, propping open a door in a farm somewhere out we don't know, is the short answer. So,
How would you cut it?
sorry?
How would you cut them?
What do you cut them with? With a diamond bladed saw. It's a standard technique in geology to make a thin section of a rock to identify it. You make a very thin slice and polish it to a specified thickness, and then if you look at it under a microscope, the optical properties of the different minerals actually allow you to identify it. So if you want to confirm the meteorite, you need to make a thin section and show those kind of features.
The tool isn't very, there wouldn't be many of those around.
Sorry?
There wouldn't be many of those kind of cutting tools.
Oh, there would, yeah. No, any university geology department would have them.
If you know any tilers, then
Tylers have them.
Okay.
It's, the guys with the saws for cutting the roads up, they're diamond bladed saws, the same kind of technique. It's just, whether you're doing it in the laboratory or in the street kind of thing. So those are the main falls. There is another one. When I did that map on the exhibition, I didn't know about it, but I read about it since. But when I was trying to find a picture to put in, I couldn't find it on my computer. But there was one in Offaly at Mount Briscoe. A guy called Ed Hill witnessed one, but there's no stone attached to it. But in fact, there's a couple of other records in Offaly of falls that we don't have any stones for, but they seem to be good witness falls. So I need to update that map. But in the course of looking for those, I came across this. This is a report from the Proceedings of the Royal Irish Academy of a fireball in 1847. I presume it's South Circular Road in Dublin, but it could be Limerick, I'm not sure actually. And I'm not going to go through these, but there are loads of fireball reports. And those of you, are very keen on astronomy will know that these are a regular occurrence, but very few of them end up with a meteorite being found. These are all from 2010 or thereabouts when I was doing the exhibition, and these are just copy text from media reports and newspapers and so on. Fireball streaks across Northern Ireland skies. That one supposedly disintegrated 70 kilometres above the ground, but it was on cameras from the Armagh Observatory. Fireballs over Scotland Island in September 23rd, in 2010. They're not uncommon, but it's finding a meteorite with them. This is a recent one I just stumbled on from October 29th this year. I don't know, does anybody see this? Yeah. I need to spend more time outside. And of course, the very well-known example is the, I should have put a slide in, but Chelyabinsk in Russia there in 2016 or so. This is a piece of the Chelyabinsk. This one, there were so many people doing insurance fraud, they were all driving around with dash cam cameras. So there's a lot of video film of this massive fireball and then all the damage where the shockwave blew out all the windows and things in the remote city in Russia. So I've got to that point and I'm quite happy to stop there and let you get a cup of tea. Or I could just go for a little bit more on impacts.
I think I'd speak for everybody when I say we'd love you to keep speaking.
Are you sure?
Okay.
Yeah, geez.
I don't want to. It's not very long. The rest of this now, just. But I've got a few.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
If one falls in your garden, can you keep it?
Yes, absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not like archaeology stuff
No,
that you have
no,
to...
No,
okay.
it's
Speciology.
finders keepers. Yeah. Actually, I'll come back to that in a second. So impacts. These are just graphics of people have done of impacts that I like and grab, and so you can imagine these impacts ejecting bits of these asteroids out, and then eventually they're landing as meteorites with us. But on Earth, when you think of the Moon or you think of those asteroids and all the impact craters on those, if you think of the Earth, why aren't we the same? Why aren't we full of craters? But there are craters, and the classic one is the Meteor Crater in Arizona. And this is an aerial shot of it. It's estimated that it was a 25 to 40 metre diameter iron meteorite that created it. And it's a crater that's 1.25 kilometres in diameter. So there was a guy called Barringer who knew that there was iron being found here, the iron meteorite fragments, and he thought he'd make his fortune, so he started drilling shafts in the base of the crater. He never got rich, but in the process we got one of the best understood meteor craters there is, because the iron was essentially part of the impact ejector. So a lot of it was vaporized, but a lot of it was splattered out and found all around the rim and fallen back into the crater. So that was the Canyon Diablo meteorite. The other big kind of product of impacts that we find on Earth are tektites, and I have some pass around these as well. Let's see what order I've got to do. This map shows the same. It's the same as the previous one, but you've got what are known as strewn fields. So we go back here. You've got asteroids, Darwin glass, Indochina, and there's various ones from the Philippines and Vietnam and a lot of countries in that region. And this is what's called the strewn field. The crater that created those tektites is long since gone, because on Earth you've got active geological processes, plate tectonics and volcanoes and so on, that are continually recycling the Earth's crust, and that basically destroys a lot of craters. But you need obviously a big impact to make a crater. It needs to be coming in fast, and it needs probably to be coming in kind of fairly steep angle, because I showed you a picture of things like the Bovidi meteorite, and you were talking about a small dimple in the ground. So lots of meteorites have slowed down before they actually land. So the circumstances to get a crater are relatively limited. But these Australian and I went the wrong order. see Libyan desert glass there. There's a crater been found in the Sahara that produces this Libyan desert glass. And basically this is instantaneous melting of the sand from an impact of a crater. So you get this beautiful lemon yellow glass. And that was used by prehistoric peoples to make stone tools in the same way that early peoples here used flint and chert to make tools. So you can get stone tools made out of this as well. The Australasian Chinese ones tend to be black. These techites, they're all a form of glass. They're basically whatever rock was hit was melted and then cooled very quickly. So it's glass, hasn't had time to crystallise into a different rock. And that's round a few. Through here of different shapes. Have a look at them. You see they're all, they've got quite a distinctive kind of surface. They can be various shapes. Sometimes you get these very fancy buttons and funny things. A lot of them are like this, and that's because the glass was molten while it was spinning through the air. And it kind of it was spinning and it kind of stretched and then sometimes broke, so you get these dumbbell shapes or you get these kind of things. So these you can buy the kilo in certain places. If we go back to the map, that you might have noticed the Reese crater in Germany. I haven't got an example of it here, but this is the impactite rock. This is the broken up rock at the margins and the base of the crater. But what this produced in terms of glass were moldavite. And I have just one here to pass around. When you have it in your hands, hold it up towards a light and you'll see it's a green colour, like these. It's exactly the same material as the glass in a wine bottle. It's the same material, but it's created entirely naturally by the impact of a large meteorite. And we don't know how big the meteorite was that created this one, but the crater in Germany is 24 kilometres across, I think. And I love this picture. It's an old black and white one, but there's enough relief in the rim of the crater here to push the air up to create these clouds. So those clouds are just the little ridge of the crater rim has formed those clouds which just pick out the whole thing. So this is about 24 kilometres across. It's in Germany. Most of those moldavites are found in the Czech Republic, perhaps 100 kilometres away. So this stuff was, it was seriously scattered up into the atmosphere before it fell down again. And then, of course, all those craters on the moon. Some of them have ejected bits of the moon out into space, and then they've landed on Earth. And these are very, very rare. There's something like between 35 and 40,000 meteorites which have been fully classified, named, documented, and are recognised. And of those, something like between 35 and 40 are lunar meteorites. So they are very rare. This is one, and again, I brought it along with me for you to look at. I'm not going to pass it around. I may as well, I suppose. Give you all a chance to look at it instead of all having to crowd at the end. It's so as a rock type, it's very like earth rocks, but it's got all these fractures in it. It's shattered basically by the impact. So that's one type. There are many types of different types of lunar meteorites, but they mostly have some sort of features that allow us to be sure they're lunar. And we even have the same from Mars. Again, I'm going to pass this one around. These are that's real, yeah.
Moon rock.
Sorry?
It's moon rock.
It's moon rock. It's a slice of a meteorite. It's not the whole thing. It's again, it's a polished slice. I've actually, well, I was only going to pass these two around because what I normally say is you're going to be amongst a small select group of people who've been able to hold a piece of the moon and a piece of Mars in their hands, but you've already got those. So I think I'm almost done. Sorry? It's a piece of Mars which has been ejected by the impact onto Mars. So you smack an asteroid into Mars, it ejects a bit out into space, then that intersects with the Earth's orbit and lands as a meteorite here. So they're very rare as well. There's only something like 35 Martian meteorites as well. As far as we know, nobody has been killed by a meteorite impact, but there has been damage like this. This car and the meteorite are in a French museum. And there's impacts like Tunguska where you had a meteoroid which exploded above the Earth. There's no real meteorite stuff, but there's a vast area of Siberia that the trees were all blown with the blast. Dinosaurs. I'm not gonna dwell on this. It's very probable that a major impact in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico created the conditions that killed off the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. But there's lifetimes of research work for paleontologists and geologists to keep on trying to find the answer there, I think. So it brings us back to the beginning, exhibition-wise. Next year there will be an exhibition in the riding school in Collins Barracks in Dublin, celebrating the Geological Survey's 175th anniversary, and I'm hoping to weave some of these things into that exhibition. That's the short term. In the longer term, we do have ambitions, and it's in the museum's master plan and everything, to build an Earth Science Museum on the Collins Barracks site. So hopefully all of these treasures and more that I didn't bring will be on display in the future, but when I might be retired by then, I'm afraid.
Is all this normally storage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. Well, this is a handling box of stuff that I do bring out and use regularly. So a lot of what you've seen is purposely bought and handed to prevent. But most of the Irish meteorites and so on are normally securely locked away. As are these. Well, actually, no.
That's the light.
That's the light.
I brought these just for a secondary interest. This is a replica, they're both replicas. This is the moon rock that was given by President Nixon to the Irish nation from Apollo 11, and this one's from Apollo 17. Some of you probably know the story of the Apollo 11. Does everybody know the story of this one? No?
It went
it was on display in Dunsink Observatory, and they had a fire there in 1977, and the little bit of moon rock that was in it was obviously swept up with all the debris and put into the Dunsink dump across the road, and it's still there, so if you want to go and dig it up. These are something I definitely wouldn't bring out to an event like this. These are replicas that we just had made recently, so I think you're one of the second people to see them. And that's it. Yeah, thanks very much.
thank you so much. That was, I don't know, my mind is blown. I'm the kid in the candy store over here. I wonder, do people want to ask a couple of questions?
I'm fine with questions. I'm conscious of your time that we're running.
I think this is a rare opportunity for us to actually ask these questions. So does anybody wants to ask a couple of questions? Yeah. Or
Yeah.
Out of everything that we've seen today, which was the oldest? Do you know?
Basically, these meteorites, in simple terms, are all as old as the solar system. So
Have any of them been dated specifically?
I didn't bring any, but Carbonaceouschondrites are older than them, and I haven't got any of those. They're normally older than but I haven't got any of those, I'm afraid. So I don't know how you would differentiate whether.
No, I just wanted to.
I mean, they are differentiated, so something's they're all still parent material in the beginnings of the solar system in my simplified view of the world. So yeah, any more? Yeah.
So how do you know that it came from Mars? It's a long
Yeah. In simplest terms, the rock types are kind of a bit unusual in themselves, but mainly it's down to the probes that have been to Mars
Another one.
Have identified what the gases are, and in those meteorites there's tiny amounts of gas that has been analysed, and even before they had probes on Mars, they were able to match the spectral analysis, remote spectral analysis of the atmosphere on Mars to the gas in tiny amounts. So I think that's probably, and then it's kind of been verified by more accurate stuff since. So yeah.
Any new elements ever found on meteorites?
Any which, sorry?
Any new elements?
No, don't think so.
You wouldn't get much past learning.
Sorry?
You wouldn't get much past learning except in trace mass. Apparently wasn't.
I'm not aware of anything.
Just don't be stones that came from another planet, and their minerals came from another planet.
Yeah.
But we're all made of the same thing, really.
Yeah.
It's all started.
So there must mean that there's no new elements to be found out there.
Well, maybe they just haven't landed yet. I don't know. Yeah. That's in my simple world. That's all physics. I'm afraid. Yeah.
We don't worry, Julie, the stock is advertised.
So again,
When the stock is advertised, you're not worried for the things you brought with you that you're transporting.
Yes, but I don't want to go there. I trust you all implicitly. I hope nobody's been on Twitter.
Other people can see the stock is advertised.
I wasn't too specific about bringing things, and the handling box I do take anywhere, and that everything in there was purchased for the purpose, and if I hope it doesn't happen, but if it got stolen, it's not priceless like this. The Campo del Cielo, you can go and buy another piece. Mali, all of these are replaceable. Yes, all the Irish ones. Well, they're all unique in their own individual way, if you like, but yeah, I could.
Someone would have parsed it.
Yeah, I mean this was probably the most expensive one. What was it? Can't remember now. but
Still carries a bit, isn't it?
it's probably €1,000
It's
in
new
that box.
gifts and cards.
Talking financial placement. So,
That's in the millions then.
Yeah, schools and that stuff now. Would you go visit schools and stuff like that?
not really, just don't have the manpower. I'm the only geological curator. We have educational assistants that put on events, so I do things in the museum with it. So, I sit there on Saturday for a couple of hours and have family groups come around. I've also worked with a transition year teacher who uses it to run a specific geology course in their school, and they love that. It's the most popular course, and the meteorites are always the thing they love most.
So I meet you the moon.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
A bigger project version of that will go to all the education centres that schools can then use, but it needs time and money to put it together.
Let's take one last question. I just jumped into
So you said that Ireland's not really had any rare meteorites, they're all chondrites.
Yeah.
Has there been any other, or are they literally all chondrites?
They're all chondrites. They're all. There's a classification scheme for chondrites, and it kind of relates to whether they are and fractured they are, and various other features. And I forget, but I think all the Irish ones are all the same. LL chondrite 5 or something, whatever it is.
That's just down to look, really, than anything else.
Statistics, really.
Good question.
85% of them are stony.
It's like, as you said, there was a lot of people have spotted fireballs. There's been a lot of locations, like there was one supposed to be around the Burn a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And these are all unfound, and I'm sure there is other ones falling. It's just that the ones that are found just seem to be.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, it may be that others falling are different types. I really don't know. In my career, both in the museum and then before that in the Geological Survey, and before that in academia, and before that in the National Museum of Wales, I've looked at loads and loads of suspected meteorites. And actually, did I? I may have skipped over to. Sorry. Must have accidentally skipped over that one. Basically, meteorons are what turns up rather than meteorites. I've yet to see in any of the inquiries that I've dealt with. But whoever was asking if you found one in your garden.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, could you half it and sell half and give half to the museum?
You could. That would be very acceptable.
So there's no state requirement to offer it up, or
no,
okay.
No.
You happen to be out,
if you happen to be out,
walking the dog, and
strike lucky. Yeah, that's it. It's not like archaeology where the state has a legal right to keep things from you or take things from you.
I think what she meant to say there was keep half it, sell it, and give the other half to me.
I don't mind, but give us first refusal on buying it, would you? That's I wouldn't like to see a meteorite land and then the National Museum not end up with a sample of it. Ultimately, I suppose that's what I'm saying. It would be an awful shame.
The Limerick Meteorite was such a big fall, it's unlikely every piece of it was recovered or seen.
Probably not, no.
So is it could they survive 200 years in the
yeah,
without being eroded completely? Or?
Yeah, because the chondrites, I mean there is iron and nickel in those spheres and in the rock, but they're not like the iron ones. The iron ones, if you dump them into
rust,
a fairly humid environment like Ireland, they're going to rust
yeah.
fairly quickly. But the chondrites, there's a good chance.
So there's still, around the fields of Fahad there could still be,
yeah,
possibly.
could well be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you bought a piece, did you say?
I did, yeah, it is.
Very good. Okay.
I mean, at the equivalent price, that's over 2 million, what you have. Sorry, yeah, maybe I shouldn't.
Very nice.
I mean, I hope I know he's well known, he's famous,
no.
But he has he's
going back to the topic of buying things, there is a Mineral Collectors and Dealers Association that is a self-policing thing, so if you're going to buy meteorites, you want to buy from members of that association, whereas if you're buying from somebody who've no idea who they are on eBay, you don't know what you're getting. I regularly get some very interesting adverts for Uraniites, which are an obscure group of meteorites from some Chinese guy that, I didn't straight away because you just haven't, you've no guarantees, but the main mineral dealers are all part of a network that, they police themselves basically. So
I guess it's harder to pass off a known find because they can sample it and they have to.
The chemistry is all documented and the whole characteristics, textures and everything. Yeah, that's why you could buy a meteorite from some Moroccan type of dealers at trade shows and things, and they are meteorites, and you can see the meteorites, but they've never been classified or cut or characterized. So mostly they're very weathered ones that have been out in the desert for a long time, and they're not overly exciting. But you can certainly get, if you want to own a meteorite, it's not that expensive to get some of the common ones.
Great, I think that was fantastic. Thanks very much.